In the heart of the alien capital stood the Grand Hall, a place of ancient power and tradition. The high ceiling stretched far above, decorated with sparkling gems and shining metal. The walls were made of smooth, dark stone, and the air was thick with the scent of flowers and something foreign, something the humans could not name. Alien beings from across the galaxy had gathered to witness what they thought would be a simple demonstration. The alien queen, Valara, sat on her massive throne, her posture regal and proud. She looked down at the gathering, her eyes shining with a hint of amusement. The queen had invited humans to the Grand Hall for the first time, hoping to see the strange species they had heard so much about. Among the humans present was a soldier named Matt, who had been chosen as the representative. Matt was tall and strong, but he did not look any different from other humans. He stood silently at the back of the room, his eyes scanning the many alien faces. The aliens around him whispered among themselves, some curious, some judgmental. They had heard rumors about the humans, how they were weak, how they could not withstand the harsh conditions of the galaxy like the other species. The queen herself had heard these rumors, and she wanted to see for herself. She smiled slightly to herself, thinking of how easily she could silence these rumors. After a moment, a loud voice echoed across the hall. It was Vorash, the queen's chief advisor. He was tall, his body covered in shimmering armor, and he looked down on Matt with a smug expression. He had long been one of the most vocal critics of the humans and had no faith in their abilities. "Let us see if the human is truly as strong as they say," Vorash called out. With a wave of the queen's hand, the guards at the front of the room moved aside, revealing a massive throne sitting on a raised platform. The throne was a work of art, made from thick, dark metal, adorned with jewels and shining in the light of the Grand Hall. It was unlike any throne seen before. Standing at 800 pounds, it was too heavy for most creatures in the galaxy to even touch, let alone lift. The queen stood up slowly, her voice clear and strong. "I offer you a challenge, human," she said, her eyes fixed on Matt. "Lift my throne. Show us your strength." Her words echoed through the hall, and the crowd fell silent. They looked at Matt, expecting him to fail. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Matt took a step forward, his eyes narrowing slightly as he gazed at the throne. He had seen it before, but he had never expected to be asked to lift it. The size of it, the weight, it was a symbol of power for the queen. No one had ever succeeded in moving it, not even the strongest of alien warriors. It was a symbol of authority, a reminder of the queen's unmatched strength. The crowd began to murmur, some laughing quietly, others watching with intense curiosity. They knew this would be nothing more than a spectacle, a way to prove the humans were not strong enough to survive in the galaxy. The humans had a reputation for being weak, fragile, and slow. The other species, with their advanced bodies and strength, had long considered themselves superior. But Matt remained calm. His face showed no emotion as he approached the throne. The alien nobles, watching closely, laughed quietly among themselves, certain that the human would fail. "This will be a good show," one of them whispered to another. Matt didn't look at the crowd or the throne. He simply took another step forward, his fingers brushing the cold metal of the seat. He felt the weight of it in his hands. It was heavy, yes, but it was not impossible. He could see the places where his hands could get the best grip, the spots, where the throne's weight could be balanced. He crouched down, his strong legs bending, and his muscles tightened. He took a deep breath and stood still for a moment, gathering his strength. In his mind, he focused on the challenge ahead, not the weight of the throne, not the doubt of the aliens watching. He had lifted heavy objects in the past. This was no different. The only difference now was that everyone was watching. Vorash watched with a sneer on his face. He had seen many fail, and he was sure the human would do the same. "You see, Queen Valara," Varash said with a mocking tone. The humans are no different. They cannot match us. The queen, however, said nothing. She had seen this many times before. Arrogant warriors underestimating the strength of others. She stood silently, her hands resting lightly on the armrests of her throne, her eyes fixed on Matt. She had not expected much, but she would watch nonetheless. Matt finally gripped the edges of the throne. His fingers dug into the metal, and he slowly began to lift. The weight was almost unbearable at first, but he focused on his breathing. The room was quiet, except for the sound of Matt's exertion. His muscles strained, but his body remained steady. The first few inches of the throne came up with surprising ease. The crowd's laughter faded as they watched, their disbelief growing with each passing second. Matt's feet dug into the floor, his body bending, his arms pulling the weight up. Slowly, steadily, the throne rose from its resting place. The queen's eyes widened in surprise. She had expected strength, but not this kind of strength. Her heart raced as she watched the human lift the throne higher. For a moment, it seemed as though time stood still. Even Vorash's face shifted from smugness to shock. He could not believe his eyes. Matt's muscles trembled as he held the throne. The crowd, once filled with laughter, now stared in silence. Matt held the throne at waist height, his body straining but holding firm. The queen was silent, her eyes never leaving him. For a moment, Matt's focus wavered as he looked at her, and the weight of the throne seemed to increase. But he held on. With a final effort, Matt carefully lowered the throne back into its place. The hall remained still, the air heavy with disbelief. The crowd had no words. They had expected failure, but they had witnessed something else entirely. Matt stood tall, breathing heavily, but his face was calm. He didn't need to speak. His actions had already spoken for him. The crowd remained silent, and the queen watched him closely. For the first time, she truly saw the strength of the human species. The grand hall remained silent, the air thick with tension. Matt stood at the center of the room, still breathing heavily after lifting the queen's throne. His muscles ached, but he held his head high, looking around at the faces of the alien council. Their stunned silence was more than he expected. He had done it. The challenge that had seemed impossible was now over, and yet the room felt colder than ever. The queen, Valara, stood up slowly from her throne. Her eyes glinted with something unreadable as she watched Matt. The alien nobles and leaders around the hall exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to make of the human success. Valara's voice broke the silence, sharp and clear. The human has passed the first test, but we are not done yet. Matt stood tall, unsure of what came next. He had not expected this. He had only thought about lifting the throne. He had never imagined that he would be part of some grand spectacle, let alone be tested in front of so many powerful beings. "Come forward, human," Valara commanded. Matt took a deep breath and stepped forward, his eyes locked on the queen. As he approached the throne again, the alien leader's gaze never wavered. Valara's face was calm, yet Matt could see something in her eyes. She was studying him, measuring him. He didn't know why, but for some reason, the queen seemed interested in him more than just a curiosity. "Tell me your name," Valara said, her voice still commanding. "Matt," he said simply. The queen tilted her head slightly. "Matt," she repeated softly, almost as if testing the sound of his name on her tongue. "You are not like the others." She looked around at the alien council, who were still in shock over his success. "You have strength, but it is not the strength of your body that concerns me." Matt felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What did she mean? He had lifted the throne. Wasn't that enough? But Valara continued, her tone never wavering. You have something else, something that these other beings do not understand. You have resilience, and that, human, is what makes you different. You may be small, but there is power in you." She paused for a moment as if considering something. "I want to see more." Matt felt his heart race as the Queen's gaze locked onto him again. He didn't know what she wanted or why she was looking at him this way. He had never been important, never been the center of attention like this. He was just an ordinary soldier, part of a larger team. Yet here, in this alien hall, he was more than that. The weight of her gaze made him feel something else. Something powerful, yet frightening. "You," Valara said, now addressing the alien leaders, "must decide whether you wish to witness something truly unique. I have chosen this human for the next part of the trial, but only one thing remains. He must choose. He will choose one of you to join him in this challenge." The room erupted into murmurs of surprise. The council members were taken aback, unsure of what to make of this unexpected twist. Valara's voice rose above the chaos. "Enough. The human has shown his worth. But now, it is his decision." The murmurs quieted, and all eyes turned to Matt. He stood there, confused and unsure of what was expected of him. He had lifted the throne. He had passed the first test. But now, he had to make a choice, something that would determine the rest of his fate. A tall, alien leader with green skin, sharp features, and a piercing stare stepped forward. His eyes were filled with a mixture of arrogance and confidence. "I will join you, human," he said in a deep voice. "I have the strength to protect you. I have fought in countless battles. You will need me to succeed." Matt could feel the pressure mounting. The green-skinned leader was powerful, no doubt about it, but Matt had no reason to trust him. There was something about the way the alien spoke that made Matt uneasy. This was no simple choice. This was a game, a dangerous game. Before Matt could respond, another alien leader stepped forward. This one was shorter, with silver scales that gleamed in the light. She had an air of calm, her movements graceful and measured. "I would also join you," she said softly. "I have studied the ways of humans. I understand your species better than anyone else here. I can help you succeed." Matt narrowed his eyes at her, unsure if he should trust her. She seemed calm, but there was something mysterious about her. She knew too much about humans for his comfort. As the council leaders continued to argue, one voice broke through the noise. It was Valara's voice, steady and commanding. "Enough," she said, silencing the room once more. "The choice is Matt's, not theirs." Matt turned toward her, his mind racing. He wasn't sure who to choose. None of these leaders had shown him any reason to trust them. They were all powerful, but they were also part of the system that had captured him and brought him to this strange place. He thought about the trials ahead, about what Valara had said about resilience and strength. Perhaps the true challenge was not just physical. It was about who he could trust, who would stand by him in the trials. For a long moment, Matt stood still, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He looked around at the leaders of the alien council, each one more powerful than the next. But then his gaze fell on someone else, the one person who had never spoken, who had only watched quietly from the back. It was Irina. She was a quiet figure, not as tall as the others, but standing with a quiet strength that intrigued Matt. Irina had not come forward like the others. She had not boasted of her skills or made grand promises. She had simply stood back, watching everything unfold, with a calmness that seemed out of place. There was something about her that made Matt feel a strange sense of comfort. Irina had a presence that he couldn't quite place, but it was different from the others. She didn't seem interested in playing games. She was something else entirely. Finally, Matt took a deep breath and pointed at her. "I choose her." The main room went quiet once again. All eyes were on Matt as the council looked at each other in disbelief. Valara smiled slightly, as though she had expected this choice all along. The tension in the air was thick as Matt stood alongside Arena. The alien council watched them, their faces unreadable, their eyes filled with curiosity and suspicion. No one had expected Matt to choose Arena. They had expected him to pick a warrior or someone with greater power. But Matt had chosen her, and now it was time for the trial to begin. The queen, Valara, stood at the front of the room, her eyes focused on the two of them. She raised a hand, and the guards at the door stepped aside, revealing a wide, open chamber beyond. The chamber was unlike anything Matt had seen before. It was a vast arena, surrounded by towering stone walls. Strange symbols lined the floor, and in the center of the room stood a large pedestal covered in glowing crystals. "This is where the trial will take place," Valara said, her voice echoing through the hall. "The rules are simple. You will face a series of challenges designed to test your strength, your mind, and your resolve. If you succeed, you will have proven yourselves worthy. If you fail, you will be cast aside." Matt felt his heart race. This was no simple game. This was a test of everything he had, everything he had never prepared for. But he wasn't going to back down. He had made his choice, and now he had to see it through. Arena stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming in the light. She stood tall and strong, her eyes focused ahead, not showing any fear. Matt followed her, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. He had chosen her because she was different, because there was something about her that felt right. But now he had to prove that his choice was the right one. Valara's voice rang out again. "The first challenge is simple. Survive the creatures of the wild." With a snap of her fingers, the floor beneath them began to shift. Large stone doors slid open, revealing a dark passage leading into a dense, alien forest. The trees in the forest were unlike any Matt had seen before. Their branches twisted and coiled like snakes, and strange creatures could be heard in the distance, growling and screeching. "Go," Valara said. "You must navigate the forest and reach the other side. There are no weapons here, only your wits and your strength." Matt and Arena exchanged a glance. They didn't need to speak. Both of them understood what was at stake. They stepped into the forest, the thick, damp air pressing in around them. The sound of distant creatures grew louder, but there was no turning back. The moment they entered, the ground beneath their feet seemed to come alive. Matt could feel the floor shift beneath him, and he had to steady himself. Arena moved ahead of him, her movements graceful and purposeful. She was quick, scanning the area around her as they moved deeper into the forest. Matt kept close, watching her every move. He wasn't sure what they would face, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let Arena down. She had chosen him, and now he had to prove himself worthy of that choice. Suddenly, the ground shook. The trees around them trembled, and a loud roar echoed through the forest. Matt spun around, his heart racing. He saw a massive creature charging toward them, its body covered in thick, spiny armor and its eyes glowing bright red. The creature was easily 3 times the size of a human, and it moved with terrifying speed. Arena didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, drawing something from her side, an energy blade, glowing blue with a sharp edge. She swung it at the creature, slicing through its armor with ease. But the creature wasn't done. It snarled and swung its massive claws, swiping at Arena with a force that could send her flying. Matt felt a rush of adrenaline as he ran forward, his mind racing. He had no weapon, but he couldn't just stand there. He grabbed a large branch from the ground and swung it at the creature, hoping to distract it long enough for Arena to get a hit in. To his surprise, the creature recoiled slightly from the blow, its focus shifting to him. Matt quickly dodged as it lashed out with its claws, narrowly missing him. He wasn't a fighter like Arena, but he was resourceful. He had to think quickly. "Arena, look out!" Matt shouted as the creature lunged toward her again. Arena was quick. She spun, ducking beneath the creature's massive claws, and with one swift motion, she drove her energy blade into its side. The creature let out a roar of pain before it collapsed, its massive body falling to the ground with a loud thud. Matt breathed a sigh of relief as he stepped back, watching the creature's glowing eyes dim. Arena stood over it, her blade still, glowing as she pulled it free. She turned to him, her eyes serious but filled with gratitude. "You were quick to act," Arena said. "Good thinking." Matt gave her a nod, feeling a rush of pride. "I couldn't let it hurt you." She gave a small smile, but her expression quickly returned to one of focus. "We have to keep moving. There are more dangers ahead. They didn't have time to rest. The creatures of the forest were not the only challenge they would face. The forest itself seemed to shift around them, changing paths and hiding dangers in the shadows. Matt and Arena moved quickly, keeping close to each other, watching their surroundings carefully. As they moved deeper into the forest, they began to see more signs of the alien creatures that lived there, tracks in the mud, broken branches, and strange glowing eyes watching them from the darkness. The forest seemed to close in around them, and Matt could feel the weight of every step, but despite the dangers, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced over at Arena, who was moving with a quiet confidence, her eyes scanning every tree and rock. She didn't seem afraid, even as the forest seemed to grow more menacing by the second. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the other side of the forest. The trees parted and they stepped into a clearing. In the distance, Matt could see the exit, a large stone archway that led back to the grand hall. They had done it. They had survived the first challenge, but Matt knew this was only the beginning. There were many more tests ahead, and he would have to keep his wits about him if he hoped to succeed. The clearing was quiet, the only sound being the soft rustling of the trees in the distance. Matt and Arena stood still for a moment, catching their breath after the dangerous challenge they had just faced. The creature's body lay in the forest, behind them, motionless. But the danger wasn't over yet. They both knew that they had only completed the first part of the trial. There would be more to face, and the creatures of this strange forest weren't the only danger lurking in the shadows. Arena turned to Matt, her silver eyes scanning the horizon. She was calm, but Matt could see the sharpness in her gaze. She was always on alert, always looking for the next threat. He admired her focus and her calm in the face of danger. He had never been in a situation like this before, but somehow, he felt like he was learning from her with every step. "We should keep moving," Arena said softly, her voice steady. "The trial is far from over." Matt nodded, his body still tense from the fight. He wasn't used to facing such dangerous creatures, but he had survived. That was all that mattered. As they moved forward, Matt couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The air had become heavier, thicker, almost suffocating. The forest, which had seemed so alive before, now felt like a trap closing in on them. They walked for what felt like hours, their steps cautious and quiet. The path ahead twisted and turned, making it hard to tell if they were going in the right direction. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, and strange sounds echoed through the trees. Matt could hear whispers, low, almost inaudible voices that sent chills down his spine. He couldn't tell if it was the wind or something else. "Arena," Matt whispered, his voice barely above a breath. "Do you hear that?" Arena stopped, her eyes narrowing as she listened. "I hear it," she said quietly. "We're not alone." Before Matt could respond, a dark figure darted out from the shadows, moving so quickly that he barely had time to react. The figure was a tall, cloaked figure, moving with a fluid grace that made it seem almost like a shadow itself. In an instant, it was upon them, its movements fast and precise. Arena reacted first, drawing her energy blade with a swift motion, her body already in a defensive stance. She swung the blade at the cloaked figure, But the figure dodged with surprising agility, disappearing into the shadows just as quickly as it had appeared. Matt's heart raced, and he quickly looked around, trying to spot where the figure had gone. He couldn't see anything, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with every passing second. He could feel eyes on him. No, not just eyes, but something else. Something dangerous. Suddenly, the figure reappeared, this time from behind a large tree. Matt barely had time to react before the figure lunged toward him, its sharp claws glinting in the dim light. The creature moved faster than he could follow. Its attack swift and deadly. Arena was beside him in an instant, blocking the creature's strike with her energy blade. The two were locked in a deadly dance, Arena moving with precision, her blade flashing through the air. The creature, however, was quick and relentless. Its movements were erratic, almost unnatural, as it tried to strike at Arena's exposed side. Matt's mind raced. He had no weapon, no way to defend himself, but he couldn't just stand there. He had to help. His eyes scanned the area, looking for anything that could give him an advantage. There, on the ground near his feet, was a large, jagged rock. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Without thinking, Matt picked up the rock and hurled it at the cloaked figure. The creature was fast, but it didn't expect the rock to hit it. The rock struck the figure in the back, causing it to stumble and fall. For a brief moment, the creature was disoriented, and that was all Arena needed. With a swift motion, Arena slashed at the creature, her blade cutting through the air and striking the cloaked figure's side. The creature let out a sharp cry of pain, its claws scraping against the ground as it attempted to retreat. But it was too late. Arena's blade found its mark, and with a final precise strike, the creature collapsed to the ground, motionless. Matt stood frozen, his breath coming in short gasps. He had never been in a fight like this before, but he had helped. He had done something. For the first time since the trial began, he felt like maybe he wasn't as out of place as he had once thought. Arena turned to him, her eyes still sharp, but there was a hint of approval in them. "You acted quickly," she said, her voice calm as always. "That's good. In the trials, it's not just strength that counts. It's being able to think on your feet." Matt nodded, feeling a strange sense of pride. "I just did what I had to do," he said, his voice still shaky from the fight. "Never forget that," Arena said, her expression softening slightly. "In this trial, doing what you have to do is often the key to survival." The words stuck with Matt as they continued their journey through the dark forest. But the creature was just one of many dangers they would face. Matt didn't know what awaited them next, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't do it alone. He had made the right choice in trusting Arena. She was strong, but she also understood what it took to survive. Together, they had already proven that they could overcome the challenges ahead. As they pressed on, Matt couldn't shake the feeling that the trials were just beginning. There was more to come, and whatever awaited them would test their courage, their resolve, and their trust in each other. But Matt felt ready. With Arena by his side, he knew they had a chance. They had faced the first danger, and they had won. Now it was time to face the next challenge, and whatever else the trial had in store for them. The forest was behind them now, but the trial was far from over. As Matt and Arena moved deeper into the alien world, they could feel the weight of what they had already faced, but there was no time to rest. The next challenge awaited them, and it was unlike any they had faced before. They had left the dangerous creatures of the forest behind, but the quiet that followed was no better. It was as if the world itself had gone silent, holding its breath. The path ahead seemed to stretch on forever, but no signs of life appeared. It was eerie, unsettling. They had traveled for hours through winding paths, the sky overhead growing darker as they moved forward. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, and Matt could sense that something was about to happen. They weren't alone. Something watched them from the shadows, and he could feel it pressing in from all sides. But no creatures attacked. No sounds broke the silence. Finally, they reached a large stone archway at the base of a towering cliff. The archway was ancient, covered in strange markings that Matt couldn't understand. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. There was no sign of a door or gate, just the archway itself leading into darkness. "Here," Irina said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped forward, her hand brushing against the cool stone. She seemed to recognize it, even though Matt had no idea where they were. "What is this place?" Matt asked, his voice low. The air around them was thick, and he could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The silence was unsettling. Irina didn't answer immediately. She studied the archway for a moment longer before stepping into it. "This is the entrance to a chamber. It was hidden for a reason." Matt followed her, his steps slow and cautious. The further they walked, the darker it became. The path seemed to narrow, and the walls around them seemed to close in as though they were moving through a tunnel that had not been touched by time. After what felt like an eternity, they came to a stop. Ahead of them, in the center of the tunnel, was a large stone door. It was massive, its surface covered in intricate carvings and symbols Matt didn't recognize. At first glance, it seemed impossible to open. But there was something in the air. An energy, a pull, drawing them closer to it. "This is it," Irina said, her voice steady but filled with awe. "The final challenge lies beyond this door, but it will not open unless we pass the test." "What kind of test?" Matt asked, his curiosity piqued. Irina glanced at him, her silver eyes serious. "A test of your mind, your choices. This chamber is not just a place, it is a puzzle, and only those who understand its secrets can enter." Matt didn't understand. How could a door be a test? But before he could ask more, Irina stepped forward, her hand resting on the cold surface of the door. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, everything was still. The carvings on the door began to glow faintly, a soft blue light creeping across the surface. The symbols shifted, rearranging themselves in patterns Matt could not follow. For a moment, he felt a strange sensation in his chest, as though the door was alive, watching him, waiting for something. Irina spoke softly, her voice barely above a murmur. "The test requires trust. You must place your hand on the door as well. Only then." "Will it open?" Matt hesitated for a moment. He wasn't sure if he could trust this strange chamber, but he had no choice. He had already chosen to be a part of this trial, and if he wanted to finish it, he had to follow through. Slowly, he stepped forward and placed his hand on the cold stone. The moment his fingers made contact with the door, the air around them seemed to hum with energy. The glow from the carvings brightened, and a soft sound, almost like a whisper, echoed in the chamber. Matt felt a strange sensation in his mind, as if his thoughts were being pulled in many different directions at once. The symbols on the door began to shift faster now, faster than his eyes could follow. It was as if the door was testing him, trying to see if he could solve its mysteries. Then everything stopped. The glowing symbols disappeared, and the door slowly began to open, revealing the chamber beyond. It was dark, and the walls seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. The floor was covered in a thin layer of dust, untouched for centuries. Irina stepped forward, her eyes scanning the chamber. "It's time," she said, her voice steady as always. "This is where the real test begins." Matt followed her into the room, his heart racing with anticipation. The air inside was thick with the weight of history. The chamber felt ancient, as though it had been waiting for them for centuries. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it lay a glowing orb. The orb was pulsating with light, and it seemed to call to Matt, pulling him closer. But, as he stepped forward, a voice echoed through the chamber, deep and powerful. Only the worthy may claim the power of the orb, the voice said. It was not a voice he recognized, but it filled the room, shaking the very air around him. Matt turned to look at Irina, but she remained silent. She had already seen this, he realized. She had already faced this test. Now, it was his turn. The voice spoke again, this time more insistent. Choose wisely. Only one may take the orb, the other must remain behind. Matt's heart pounded in his chest. The voice was offering him power, but at a price. He had to make a choice. Take the orb and leave Irina behind, or let her claim it and stay behind himself. He turned to Irina. She was watching him, her expression unreadable. What should I do? He asked, his voice quiet. I can't choose between us. Irina's eyes softened. You must trust yourself. This is your trial, Matt. The choice is yours. Matt looked back at the glowing orb. It was so tempting, so full of power. But the weight of the decision felt unbearable. He had never been in a situation like this. He had never had to choose between power and the person standing beside him. But now, it was time to decide. The orb could change everything, but so could his decision. With a deep breath, Matt made his choice. The orb was still glowing, its light pulsing gently like a heartbeat. It seemed to draw Matt closer, its power almost tangible in the air around him. He stood there, frozen, his heart racing as the voice echoed in the chamber, urging him to make a decision. It was an offer too tempting to ignore, yet the cost was unclear. Matt glanced at Irina, who stood beside him, her face calm, but her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. She had already faced this test. He could see it in the way she held herself, steady and unshaken by the pressure. She had chosen her path long ago, and now it was his turn. The voice spoke again, its tone deep and unyielding. Only one may take the orb. The other will remain behind, left to face their own trial. Irina's eyes met Matt's, and in that moment, he knew what she was thinking. This was not just about the orb, it was about their bond, their choice to face the trials together. But now it seemed the trial had split them apart. Matt felt the weight of the decision press down on him. He had to choose. Take the power of the orb or leave it for Irina. He felt the pull of the orb, the power that seemed to promise everything. Power to protect, power to win, power to change the course of the trial. But something in his chest held him back. He wasn't just here for himself. He had chosen to stand by Irina, to face this trial with her. The orb might give him strength, but it wasn't the only thing that mattered. With a deep breath, Matt turned to face Irina. I can't take it, he said softly. Not without knowing the cost. Irina nodded, her expression unreadable, but her eyes held a flicker of respect. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the orb, and immediately a surge of light filled the chamber. The air seemed to shift, becoming heavier with energy. The voice that had spoken before returned, louder and more urgent. You have made your choice. The orb will remain in its place, but your bond will be tested. Before Matt could react, the chamber shifted. The walls seemed to move, the ground beneath their feet vibrating as the space around them grew darker. The orb remained on its pedestal, but the light it emitted dimmed. Matt reached out instinctively, but the chamber had already begun to change. The ground cracked, and a deep, rumbling sound filled the air. The voice returned, its tone now more menacing. You have chosen the path of unity, but that choice comes with a price. Only those who are truly worthy of each other may pass the final trial. If your bond is weak, you will not survive. Suddenly, the ground before them split open, revealing a deep chasm. Dark shadows seemed to move within it, and strange creatures could be heard from within. The air grew colder, and the sense of Danger grew stronger with each passing second. Irina stepped forward, her hand still resting on the orb. "Stay close," she said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "We must face this together." Without another word, she stepped onto the narrow path that had appeared before them. Matt followed, his heart still racing, but now filled with a sense of resolve. The path before them was treacherous, with sharp rocks jutting out from the walls, and the ground shaking beneath their feet. Strange, shadowy figures moved in the darkness, but they did not approach. It was as if the path was testing them, forcing them to prove their strength and their unity. As they moved forward, Matt could feel the tension in the air. The trial was not just about surviving the physical challenges, it was about trust, about proving their connection, their ability to work together. Every step they took was a test of their bond. They had to rely on each other, and they had to do it without hesitation. The path grew narrower, and the shadows grew darker. Suddenly, the ground beneath Matt's feet gave way, and he found himself falling into the chasm. His heart stopped for a moment as he plummeted through the air, but before he could hit the ground, a strong hand grabbed his arm and pulled him back to safety. Irina's eyes were locked on his, her grip firm as she held him steady. "Trust me," she said, her voice calm despite the danger surrounding them. "We do this together." Matt nodded, his heart racing, but he understood. He had made his choice, and now it was time to follow through. They had to trust each other, or they wouldn't make it out of this trial. Together, they continued down the path, facing the dangers of the chasm. The shadows shifted around them, trying to lure them off course, but they stayed focused, their movements synchronized. They had faced challenges before, but this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that their bond was strong enough to overcome anything. As they reached the end of the path, the ground beneath them suddenly stopped shaking. The darkness receded, and the air grew still. Ahead of them was another door, this one made of gold and etched with ancient symbols. The door was massive, towering above them. It seemed to pulse with energy, as though it was waiting for them to approach. The voice that had spoken before echoed through the chamber once more. "You have passed the trial of unity. The final test is now complete." The door before them slowly began to open, revealing a new space beyond. The light from the chamber filled the room, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Matt felt a sense of relief wash over him. The trial was over. They had passed, not by strength alone, but by their ability to trust, to work together. Irina turned to Matt, her eyes softening. "We did it," she said, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Matt smiled back, feeling the weight of the trial lift from his shoulders. He had chosen wisely. Together they had faced the trials, and together they had overcome them. The chamber beyond the door was filled with light, and as they stepped through, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The door closed behind them with a soft, almost inaudible click. The light that filled the chamber was brighter than any they had seen in the arena. It illuminated the room, revealing intricate carvings on the walls, symbols of power, unity, and strength. The space was grand, like a throne room, but empty. The air felt different here, heavier, as though something important was about to happen. Irina stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room. She looked at the walls, her fingers gently tracing the symbols, as if she was reading an ancient language that only she understood. Luke stood beside her, still processing everything that had happened. They had passed the trial together, but now, what came next? What had they truly earned by surviving? "What is this place?" Luke asked quietly. Irina didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved to the center of the room where a large pedestal stood. Atop the pedestal was an orb, similar to the one they had encountered earlier, but this one was different. It shimmered with a golden glow, casting long shadows on the floor. "This is the heart of the trial," Irina finally said, her voice filled with awe. "It is where the true power lies, the power that will decide the future of the trial and all that has been tested." Luke looked at her, his confusion growing. "What do you mean, decide the future? We've already been through everything." "We passed, didn't we?" Irina turned to him, her silver eyes meeting his. "We passed the tests set before us, yes, but this is not just about surviving the challenges. The true test is what happens afterward. The orb before us holds the power to shape everything." Luke felt a shiver run down his spine. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this. He had always believed that surviving was enough, but now he saw that the trials were only the beginning. "You mean we have to make another choice?" Luke said, more to himself than to Irina. Irina nodded. "Exactly. We've survived because we've trusted each other, because we've proven our strength together, but the final choice will define what happens next. We can either use this power for ourselves, for our own gain, or we can use it to change the fate of those around us." Luke stepped forward slowly, his eyes never leaving the glowing orb. He could feel the energy it emitted, a strange, almost magnetic force pulling him toward it. His thoughts raced. What could they do? With this power, what was the right choice? "I don't know what's right," Luke said quietly. "I don't know if I can make that kind of decision." Irina walked to his side and placed a hand on his shoulder. "The decision isn't just yours or mine. We make it together. This power isn't meant to be controlled by one person. It's meant for both of us. And together, we decide its path." Luke looked at her, seeing the strength in her eyes. He had trusted her throughout this journey, and now he felt that trust, stronger than ever. He couldn't do this alone, but with her by his side, they could face anything. Irina turned back to the orb, her fingers brushing the air above it. "The Council won't like this. They will want to control the power, use it for their own ends. But we can stop them. We can stop this cycle of power struggles." Luke stepped beside her, his resolve hardening. "We'll stop them together." Low hum filled the room, and the orb began to pulse with light, responding to their words. The floor beneath them vibrated gently as the room seemed to come alive. The symbols on the walls shifted, rearranging themselves, as if acknowledging their decision. The orb glowed brighter, and for a moment, Luke felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. The responsibility, the power, and the future of everything they had fought for were in their hands. "We've earned this," Irina said, her voice firm. "Now we use it to bring about the change we believe in. No more fighting for control, no more war. It ends with us." Luke nodded, his thoughts clear now. He understood what needed to be done. They weren't just two individuals anymore. They were a team, a united force, and their combined strength was enough to change the fate of their worlds. Together, they reached out to the orb, their hands just above it, letting the power flow between them. The moment they touched it, a burst of energy surged through the room, bright and overwhelming. The power they had unleashed felt like nothing they had ever experienced before. It was not a destructive force, but one of change, one that could shape the future, one decision at a time. The light from the orb filled the chamber, but it was not blinding. It was gentle, comforting, like the dawn of a new day. The power was now theirs to wield, but they would wield it with wisdom, not selfishness. As the light slowly dimmed, the orb settled, its glow softening into a steady, calm pulse. The room was still. The weight of the decision was behind them now, but the road ahead was only just beginning. Irina turned to Luke, her face softening. "We've done it. The galaxy will never be the same again." Luke smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. "No, it won't. But maybe that's what it needs." They stood together in the quiet room, the weight of the world no longer pressing down on them. They had made their choice, and together they would face whatever came next. The galaxy would change, but it would change for the better. They had proven that with unity, trust, and the strength of their bond, anything was possible. "We can finally begin," Irina said, her voice filled with hope. Luke looked at her, feeling a surge of gratitude. Together, they turned toward the door that now stood open before them, leading to the unknown. But whatever lay ahead, they were ready. And this time, it wasn't just about survival, it was about shaping the future.